What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Conflicts of Interest. This is episode 29, and I guess it's the election special. Me and Will are coming to you right now. It's about, I guess, 4 a.m. on the East Coast, the day after the election, November 4th. And, Will, I mean, tell everybody to check out the YouTube channel of Conflicts of Interest, but let's just hop right into this and talk a little bit about where we're at with the election. I mean, you've been up all night covering it. Kind of tell the people where we are. I hear that Trump has declared victory, and other than that, I mean, looking at the maps, nobody has it locked in at 270 yet, but looking at the numbers, it looks pretty good for the sitting president. So let's kind of break it down and say what's going on here.
Yeah, you're correct about that. Right now, it does seem like Trump, is doing pretty well. The race is close, and obviously, it all depends on whose projections you're looking at. They slightly differ. I think Fox's. It was interesting. Fox's earlier had like the closest race, but I think now they're showing like the biggest spread. I think let's see, the delegate count was 238 for Biden and 213 for Trump. But there are quite a few states that are still undecided, so that's not obviously the final verdict. Right now, obviously some of this stuff will become obsolete by the time people hear this. But right at this moment, near 4 in the morning on the 4th, right now, Michigan, Wisconsin, Georgia, Alaska, North Carolina, and Nevada, I think, are all the uncalled states. And right now, all of those except for Nevada show Trump in the lead. Um, but I think even if Trump just won a select few of those states, that would give him the 270 that he needs. Whereas if Biden won Nevada, that's certainly not getting him the number he'd need. However, the thing is, there's one other state that's still in play, and that is Pennsylvania. However, there's like a weird currently that shows Trump in the lead, but there's kind of a weird thing. People have been predicting that because of the mail-in ballots, and there's like a special ruling in that state where they're going to be counting them a few days after the election. And some people are thinking that that's eventually going to go in Biden's favor, even though initially they predicted initially it would show Trump in the lead, but they say later it might swing toward Biden with all the mail-in stuff. However, even if Biden were to win Nevada and Pennsylvania, I don't think that puts him on a path to victory. And all the other uncalled states right now are Trump is in the lead, and so it does look like he is, he's set for the win. There could still be, I think, in Michigan and Wisconsin, there's also things that are going to happen with the mail-in ballots that could swing things, after the fact. But again, it does look like Trump is sort of like, he has the path to victory here.
So, just at least as of right now, the only candidate we have heard from is Donald Trump, and I'm guessing we're not expecting to hear from Joe Biden tonight. Do we have any signals from his campaign if they plan on conceding, um, or does it look like? I mean, I believe Trump in his speech said that this could go to the Supreme Court, or that he was taking it to the Supreme Court. So, do you have any sense of where we are on that path? Is
Yes.
Biden going to the Supreme Court as well?
Yeah, sorry, you did ask me that. I should have answered that. Trump did give like a brief speech where he said something. He basically declared victory, all but declared victory. Said like, look at how good we're doing in all these states. And he mentioned that, I forget I would have to go back for the exact quote, but he did say that like we're going to challenge us in the Supreme Court. I think he even said like tonight we're going to try to get them to do something to get them to stop counting the ballots. But I think there was some confusion. It wasn't totally clear whether Trump was saying he wanted to stop them counting the ballots that had already been like cast, or whether the ones that had been mailed in, they're like still, coming in, whether they should stop counting those. That might just be my confusion, but I'm not clear which he meant there. But yeah, he did signal something about the Supreme Court. Now, Biden gave a brief speech as well. However, he just basically said it was like a wait and see speech. He's just saying like, we have a strong showing and let's all just like hold our horses and wait until all the mail-ins are counted. So he didn't concede, or he didn't mention anything about going to the courts or anything quite yet.
All right. Well, I mean, let's start getting into like some of the themes, I guess, of the election here. Well, I mean, pretty early on, I think there was a feeling among like the CNN types that this could be a sweep or a landslide for Joe Biden, and that essentially the night could be over on the East Coast with big Biden wins in Florida, North Carolina, and Georgia. And it doesn't look like any of those states will go to Joe Biden. But specifically, I kind of want to highlight Florida here because the predictions were it was the Cuban and the Hispanic community that overwhelmingly went Donald Trump and may have swung that state. And so, this I feel like is very interesting for us, Will, just because it does have to do with foreign policy. And while we have been pretty critical of Trump's foreign policy, especially like towards Cuba and Latin America and Venezuela, I do think those policies are probably fairly popular with the population there, and could contribute to why Donald Trump did so well in Florida. So I'm not sure if you had anything on that, but that was just an interesting thing that I noticed early on.
Yeah, I have heard about like the Cuban exile, or not necessarily exile, but like immigrant community in Florida being a little more hawkish and being very anti-communist and anti-leftist. So they'd be sort of in favor of some of the more hawkish U.S. policies towards, say, Cuba or Venezuela. And so that doesn't surprise me that they would have come out, in favor of Trump. But it does kind of cut against some of the expectations that the Hispanics would like overwhelmingly vote for Biden. I think there were some expectations like that were very much dashed, especially in Florida.
I haven't had a chance to dig through any or sift through any like exit polling yet, and I have no
Right.
idea how accurate it is because the pre-election polling, maybe that's something else we could touch on. Again, seemed to be very off. Even if Donald Trump ends up somehow losing this thing, in the courts and stuff like that, the polls had Joe Biden up in every single one of these swing states.
Yeah.
And obviously that's not the way it's going come election night. So I don't know. Do you have anything on exit polling? And if not, maybe we could just talk about I guess the big observation that again the polls were very far off in this one.
Yeah, I mean that's basically where I'd go with it. That just like just like last time, the 2016 race, that we do have like a real flaw. That the polls were very flawed. I think it was Frank Gaffney, the like renowned right wing pollster guy. I think he even said something like, if the polls are wrong this time, we like polling is like discredited. Like we have to seriously reevaluate like what this means. Because I think it is true. Like I think it's possible that these pollsters do just like tap into these like certain communities that they're not getting like the full spectrum of voters. So like there's entire like communities of people who aren't being heard in these polls, and it distorts the result.
I heard Scott Adams. On election day, I watched a wide array of coverage throughout the day, just pro Biden stuff, and then some stuff that I thought was a little bit more distinctly pro Trump, like Scott Adams.
Right.
And one of the things that he pointed out was, and he has a large number of Trump people that follow him, in that the Trump people intentionally lied to the polls, and in fact, at times will actually say they're going to vote for Biden when they're going to vote for Trump to further increase the swing between the reality and the polling. And so I thought that was an interesting dynamic, and I guess a pretty funny way to really undermine the establishment for the Trump figures. I don't even know, like, kind of Scott Adams said that he thinks that they're doing it just like as, little trolley things on their own, is no in no way coordinated or, trying to make a larger statement, but it does have that effect that it really could throw off the election results if people do stuff like that. Not the
Yeah.
election results, but the poll results.
Right. Right. Yeah. I didn't even really account for. I didn't even think about that. That people could just be completely dishonestly answering, and yeah, just to make the defeat even more bitter. I guess for
Right.
the libs to own the libs even further.
Well, yeah, I think some people speculate, at least in 2016, the speculation was that people are too embarrassed to say that they're voting for Donald Trump, but they're going to do it anyways. I'm sure that's some of it too. And so they don't tell the pollsters. I don't know why, but they don't tell the pollsters. And then when they go in the voting, booth, they vote, the person they actually want. But
Right.
Scott was suggesting that some of it was intentional. I guess, Will, are there any particular states that are still out? I guess Pennsylvania is a big one, and you touched a little bit on the mail-in balloting, but are there any other particular storylines from any of the other states that we still don't have like numbers on that are interesting? I mean, I earlier in the day they said they stopped counting the Georgia ballots for the rest of the day. I don't even know what that means. Like they all went home, they turned off the lights, they left the ballots in the locked room, and we'll get back to it at 8 a.m. tomorrow? Or did that mean, in one particular county, or maybe they have finished up counting the in-person voting and were then just counting I don't know. Do we have any sense of like when we're planning to get results in any of these states that still have their elections or, their results out?
Yeah, in terms of like Pennsylvania, I think they were saying that could take like a few days, like 3 or 4 days or something. And I believe I could be mistaken about this because like the rules for how they can count and how long they can count are different, I think, in every state. And like even like the rules for like what time they'll stay open to keep counting the ballots. Like some states shut down at 1 a.m., some 3 a.m. or whatever. Like you mentioned in Georgia, they just sort of seemingly arbitrarily stopped for the day. So Pennsylvania will be a couple days, as far as I understand. I think Michigan could possibly take that long as well. That like we could not know the result of that one for a minute. Like I said, all like pretty much all of those states except for Nevada show Trump in the lead currently. But the ones where mail-in ballots are like gonna be a factor that could switch it over to Biden. So it's not guaranteed that just because Trump's in the lead in some of these that he'll take that state.
Right. Oh, okay. It just last question I have, and I haven't seen any data on this yet, but they had talked about potentially 90 million mail-in ballots. Do we have a idea on what that number, first of all, actually is, and second, how much of that vote ended up going for Biden?
I'm not totally sure. I haven't seen a whole lot of numbers on this either. I think in Michigan they were saying something like 3 million of the ballots were mail-in, or I forget. It was a large percentage of like the turnout in Michigan that was mail-in, and it's expected that a large proportion of the mail-in people will be Biden voters. But like I haven't seen any hard numbers on that or anything. So
Okay. Anything else on the presidential side, or I mean, obviously, where there was a ton of other things on the ballot, and so we got plenty of other like election related stuff to talk about.
yeah, let's get to that. Like that's pretty much all I have for the presidential side.
Tell
It,
us
it is
about
a
the
close.
Juds, Will.
Yeah, that's right.
Where can we
We can
now
part.
legally do our Juds? Give
We
us the
can
breakdown.
can party in Oregon now. Yeah, there were a few actual drug war related ballots and referendums and measures for consideration tonight. And let's see, there's actually like a pretty good list of them. There was recreational pot was legalized in Arizona and New Jersey and Mississippi and South Dakota. Or excuse me, recreational pot was legalized in Arizona and New Jersey, whereas Mississippi and South Dakota passed medical. South Dakota may pass recreational, but the last I checked, that like the verdict wasn't in for that. So a few places legalized cannabis. DC voted to like what they call deprioritize psychedelic mushrooms, so psilocybin mushrooms and like other what they call entheogen plants, so other psychedelic plants. It's not outright decriminalizing or legalizing it, but it is telling office like law enforcement that this should be the lowest level priority. It's basically asking them to like stop enforcing these laws against these plants. And I think it also sets something up to where they'd consider this for like medical treatment for people with like mental issues or something, for psychedelics. So those are interesting. But then the best news tonight, I think, came from Oregon, and they passed a bill that decriminalizes like small possession of pretty much all drugs, including hard drugs like cocaine and heroin. And so this is like a major step forward, I think, against the drug war, is to finally start, because you and I, like libertarians like us, have been arguing all along that you can't just be pot. Like all the things that make the prohibition of pot bad are 10 times worse when you're talking about hard drugs, like cocaine and heroin and methamphetamine and stuff. And so we need to end the violent black market trades in these things, and the only way to start doing that is by decriminalizing and beginning to legalize them. And so that was a big step in Oregon. I'm not totally sure. I think it's called Measure 210. I'm not 100% of all like the details of it, but one of the provisions was to decriminalize small possession of most drugs.
All right. Yeah. And so you clarify there most drugs. What did you notice anything on the list that wasn't there that maybe should have been, or I don't know, that sometimes weird things happen, like cocaine is now fine but crack isn't, or something stupid like that.
I didn't actually see any like exemptions that I thought. I didn't see any exceptions at all. It very well may be all drugs. I'm just like, because I don't know for a fact, I'm just
Okay.
saying most, like see, but definitely all like the well-known street drugs, cocaine and heroin and crack and stuff. So
And then, so I mean, do you have like the details on the plan? Because I heard like Joe Biden during the debate mentioned that he wants to like take things to drug court, which it really isn't an improvement on the war on drugs. It just is a thing that's like, if you stay sober, you get to stay out of jail. But that's not a solution to the problem, right? And
right.
also, at least when I was involved in the drug court in New Hampshire, I don't know how people were able to pay for it. It was like an absurd amount of money a week. And then, like, they also had the thing where they could randomly drug test you any day of the week. And so you had to have a job where, it was okay to tell the boss, like, hey, my PO just called me. I have to go in and, piss in a cup. And it's probably going to take 5 hours because, they never call you on time. And you end up in the waiting room. So you got to take the entire day off of work, and then you get fired or your boss is pissed. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
this thing could be so bureaucratic and messy that it's really not helpful, or it could be, a legit libertarian solution.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I didn't spend a whole lot of time looking into the detail. I just noticed that, like, I saw some headlines that, X, Y, or Z initiative had passed. I assume there's probably, these are not ideal measures. I think one of them, what was it? I think it was the one in Oregon, was being criticized because it didn't devote enough resources to like treatment or whatever. That's not something I'm particularly like. I'm not super into demanding the state provide welfare rehab to people. I would just prefer they stop throwing people in cages for victimless crimes. So that wouldn't be a criticism of mine, but I'm sure there's a lot of there are some holes and issues with some of these things. It's certainly, even in Oregon, they're not like dismantling their probation system or anything like that. So all the ridiculous, horrible nonsense that you were just talking about, the giant racket and scam that the probation industry is in every state, basically, like that stuff, I think is all intact. But we do have, I think, a couple of instances where fewer people are going to be, having the violence of the state levied on them or thrown in cages or fined. So I think those things are, improvements.
All right. Well, what other election stuff do we have going on?
Some of the other, like, just fairly newsworthy and significant things that I'd seen. There's congressional and Senate races, and Lindsey Graham won re-election in the Senate, and so did what's his name, Mitch McConnell, the
Turtle
first.
Man.
I was going to say the first human turtle hybrid to win elected office in the United States. He won his He's in his seventh term now, so he's really going for. I think he's the longest serving, definitely in Kentucky. Or is it Kentucky? That's his.
Yeah, he's from Kentucky.
Yeah, I don't know why I suddenly like blanked on that, but yeah, I think he is now the longest serving senator in Kentucky. So, uh, quite a tenure. And then also in the House, the Squad, all four members of the Squad won. AOC, Ayanna Pressley, Rashida Tlaib, and Ilhan Omar. They will all continue to be in the House. So that's
Um, when I was looking just before we went on, Will, at least as of now, there's no indication that the House or the Senate will switch hands, and at least from what I could see, it kind of looks like maybe the gap in the Senate will close by a vote, but it'll still be a Republican majority. Although I guess one of the Georgia seats will have to have a runoff, and so I suppose it's possible that that with that runoff or something, that those it could end up being 50-50 or something like that. Although if the president has, Trump wins the White House again, then they still retain that majority, and looks like that the Dems will retain the House. Is that how it's looking for you too?
I'll be honest, man. I was trying to follow like the Senate races and stuff, but I lost track of like the overall count of like where the House and Senate stand right now overall.
Okay.
So I shouldn't weigh in.
I don't think I'm missing. I think I'm pretty accurate on that. When I looked, it had the count for the Senate up to 47-47. I think the Republicans were plus one or two on the night for the House, but they needed to be like plus 17, and they were nowhere near that number. Although there's still a
Right.
lot of races outstanding and stuff like that. Sometimes these congressional races are a lot closer, and with all these mail-in ballots, maybe these races could get a little bit nastier and legal, and take a while to resolve.
Yeah,
So,
the New York's primary, I think over the summer they had like crazy contested and like long delays because of all the mail-in stuff. So that can happen in the congressional races as much as the presidential one. So
any other election stuff before we move on, Will?
I think we pretty much hit on all the major stuff. The race is close right now. There's obviously no victor. Trump has declared victory, but in so many words. But yeah, right now we don't really have any kind of verdict, and it might take a couple days before some of these crucial states are decided. So that's where
You
it stands.
I just the last thing I'll add, I guess, was of all like the dire predictions of what could happen, especially coming from the mainstream media over the past 4 years, but specifically the past few months, it seemed to not be coming to fruition, really. Even like some of the stuff that Fox News had said, I'm not seeing a lot of like violence. Even there's a ton of BLM people down by the White House. Not seeing a ton of violence really anywhere at this point. Certainly, there wasn't the dire prediction of the Trump people going and shaking down voters and doing all kinds of crazy things that they're going to be accused of doing on standby to start the next civil war. So all of that to me is a huge relief. I mean, we're not out of the woods yet. The election results aren't finalized, and until they are, I guess it's going to kind of feel like the whole America gets to keep its record of, the peaceful transition of power, or, peacefully having elections without massive riots and death and stuff like that could continue, which I think is the result that is all the most important to all of us of this election, is that we get through it without violence and, without major fighting, especially among Americans in the streets and stuff like that. And so far, so good on that note. And I don't know. I kind of feel like, in a lot of ways, the election has gone about as smooth as it's going to go. I suppose if, on the last show, I had just talked about that I wasn't necessarily, I didn't have a favorite. I didn't vote for either of these candidates, nothing in that realm
Yeah,
at
me
all,
either.
but hoping that there was just a clear victor so that the American people could feel like, this president won the election, at least with the same amount of legitimacy that Trump won with in 2016. It doesn't have to be, they're completely content with how everything went, but at the very least, the victory is clear. I don't want to be one point in the electoral college where it's, 1,000 votes they're battling over in Pennsylvania or something like that, but rather, even if it was Joe Biden, it doesn't look like he's going to have a very clear victory at this point. If he does, it'll be extremely narrow, and even Trump's won't be like super clear. But I think he, I guess, has potential to clock in around the same number of electoral votes as the last time around. Still, um, I think I guess that's still the outcome that I'm hoping for. And I'm a little bit more optimistic that by the time we do our show on Friday, that we will have a winner, and that it'll generally be a peaceful scenario here. And so I guess I will say good on that front. And, credit to Americans where it's due that, we're able to have, these massive, the huge amounts of power being awarded and distributed out. In a lot of, places in the world, like, that doesn't go as smoothly as it does here. And that's something that we still have going on. So I think that's probably the best part of election night so far. Should we thank our sponsor, Will?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. We'll
I
tell
will
him
do it.
about Paloma Verde.
Sure, sure. Our friends at Paloma Verde CBD company were so grateful and I'm very grateful because of how generous they were to let us try a bunch of their different products, CBD products, and they've got a whole variety of things. They've got like creams and salves you can use for sore muscles or joints or inflammation. They have soft gels with various different formulations. One with curcumin for inflammation, one with melatonin to help you relax. That's the one that I like. They've got soft gels, like fruit chew gummies that are real good. And then they also have the heaviest dose is their oil extract, which is what I also really like. They even have stuff for your pets too. And so, they've got a real variety of things. And if any of that stuff sounds down your alley, you can check them out at palomaverdestore.com. That's PALOMAVERDE. Store.com, and use the promo code PEACE with your order over $75. You can get 25% off, and you can even check out their website if you just want to learn about CBD and what it does. They've got a whole education section there, so check that out if that sounds interesting. That if you're interested in that.
All right. Thanks, Will. Let's get back to the show.
Sure.
All right. Will, with the election and stuff, a lot of the other news is getting lost. And, here on Conflicts of Interest, we're not going to spend the entire show on the election. We're actually going to break down the things happening around the world that are going to be happening no matter who becomes president. And this is an update on the fighting going on between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And we have this story here from Dave DeCamp at antiwar.com. And I think that map that we have there is still pretty up to date on the fighting lines and stuff like that. And that is the Azeris are closing in on a key town in Nagorno-Karabakh. and the fighting there is just in general escalating. So, Will, what do you have on this?
Yeah, yeah. Like there is an election, but the U.S. is still an empire, and so we still got to talk about the rest of the world too. I guess this case is less to do with the U.S. empire, but things have been kind of crazy over in the Caucasus over the last month or so. We covered originally, like when the conflict in Nagorno-Karabakh first flared up in September, where you have, as you said, Armenia and Azerbaijan fighting over this disputed territory that is formally in Azerbaijan, but it's been governed by like ethnic Armenians since the 1990s. And those ethnic Armenians consider themselves their own like independent republic that's just like closely allied with Armenia proper. It's not totally clear who first started shooting in this particular round of fighting. Both sides have accused the other of starting it, but based on what I've read, it does seem the Azeris were the ones to escalate this originally into an outright hot shooting war. And another thing too to mention right off the bat here is that Armenia is pretty close with the Russians, while Azerbaijan has close ties with the Turks. And so those are like sort of the main regional powers that are backing these countries. The Azeris also go to Israel for a lot of their weapons, but I think Turkey really like openly backs them, and they have like tied like Turkic ethnic roots and all this stuff. Um,
I'll
and
just
Russia
add
has
too, the Azeris receive defense aid from the Americans, well, and weapon sales from the Americans.
right, right. Yeah, the U.S. weapons and Israeli weapons. Like you can see in some of the footage, even I think you can see like some Israeli drones that the Azeris are using. But the Russians have generally taken Armenia's side in all this, but they have tried to like mediate things to end the conflict. I think they helped to ink two different ceasefires now, which both broke down, and the both sides resumed shelling each other. And now, actually, most recently, I think a third ceasefire has now failed. The most recent one mediated by I think the U.S. And that fell through like a week ago, and since then, Azerbaijan has been making quite a few gains in the war. As you mentioned in the story that's on the screen right now, they have been making a lot of gains toward the city called Shusha, which is pretty close to like the capital city of Nagorno-Karabakh, Stepanakert, and so they are taking quite a bit of ground here. And you'd kind of expect them to. They have a larger military and economy and population than Armenia, but in the last few rounds of fighting, as they fought over this territory a few different times over the years, they haven't done so good against the ethnic Armenians there. They've been able to hold on to this little enclave. But at least most recently, the Azeris are making some gains. It seems that is sort of like the latest update in the conflict. Now, in terms of casualties, and with this conflict in particular, the numbers are like extremely sketchy because they're constantly accusing each other of lying and making up and fabricating evidence and all this stuff. But right now, the Armenian side they've reported over 1,100 soldiers killed in the fighting. The Azeris haven't released that information at all, but I think it's also likely like pretty close, at least in the hundreds of casualties. And then at least a few dozen civilians have been killed on both sides as well. But that number is also like who knows at this point. Because like there's all kinds of conflicting estimates. The Russians right now, I think, they've got like one of the higher end estimates. They think like 5,000 people have been killed altogether on both sides, including civilians and combatants. So that's fairly higher than like some of the other estimates, but it's not really clear. I can't really parse those numbers. And both sides regularly accuse each other of deliberately targeting civilians. That's like been a constant feature of this war. But right now they've returned to negotiations in Geneva that are right now mediated by the U.S. and France and Russia in what's called the Minsk Group. And in those talks, they recently agreed to stop doing that, to stop shelling civilian areas. But that like fell apart within a few hours, as you might expect in a war where there's like 3 ceasefires have already fallen apart. This agreement to stop bombing civilian areas, like just a few hours after they announced it, bombs were already falling on a market, like a street market in Stepanakert, again the capital of Nagorno-Karabakh. So things aren't looking super great at the moment. They've tried quite a few times to ink agreements and ceasefires and deals, but every single one's fallen apart. They're regularly accusing each other not only of bombing civilian areas, but bombing like each other's territory, like beyond just the disputed area, which the UN recently said that could be war crimes, that they're bombing each other's like capital cities and stuff. And most concerning, I think Russia recently said that it would come to Armenia's aid if the fighting really broke out on Armenian soil. So that really risks like dragging this thing into a bigger regional conflict, because then likely the Turks would get involved on the Azeri side, and it would really escalate things. But hopefully that doesn't get to that point. But when you have both sides regularly saying that they're bombing in each other's territory, it does start becoming a real concern. So that's basically the deal. Three ceasefires have fallen apart. International powers are getting more involved, even as they try to mediate and end the fighting. And most recently, Azerbaijan seems to have gotten the upper hand over the last couple of weeks in the fighting.
So one thing that I've heard the Armenian or Azeri leader saying that is that he's kind of plans to push his country's advantage, and so I'm not sure how soon this fighting will end because it seems like the Azeris seem to feel like they have the opportunity to reclaim this territory that and this is one of the problems with communism and empire. It was the evil empire, the USSR, and I believe this was actually a Stalinist move to put these ethnic Armenian areas within the Azerbaijan province of the USSR, which at the time, was far less meaningless. Let's say that you give a chunk of Kentucky to Tennessee, that's not too big of a deal. Although if the United States were to fall apart and Kentucky were to become its own state and Tennessee were to become its own, like, not state as in the United States, but state as in like its own government, with its own army and everything. Well,
Right, like
then,
nation state.
right, those people may feel a little bit more upset that, they were removed from what would now be their home of Kentucky, their home state of Kentucky, and are now in a different territory and stuff like that. And so, obviously that doesn't work perfectly because, Kentucky and Tennessee, I think, are fairly similar, but just as a point, that's I think part of what happened here in the long-standing problem. Then you also have an interesting play by Iran here. One thing that I've learned recently that's pretty interesting is that most Azeri people don't actually live in Azerbaijan. There's actually a larger population within Iran, and it's like 20% of the Iranian population. So they have real concerns with Azerbaijan. I believe actually that Ayatollah is an Azeri, which I would have never guessed in a million years before this whole thing came about, and I had learned that. So, and I guess the Iranians are actually a little bit concerned that if the Azeris, start to, get a little too big for their britches, that could be an opportunity for some discord within Iran too. And so they're interested in not only keeping this under wraps, but also I think helping the Armenians make sure that the Azeris don't make too much of a gain without at the same time harming their own Azeri community. I guess the last thing I had seen just quite a bit of in the recent days, where are these videos of people training. They say Christians from Lebanon and Iraq and Iran and all over the Middle East and the rest of the world. Some of them are people who are, I guess, ethnically Armenian, are training up to go fight, in this region. And I'm not sure. They, in a way, watching some of the video, it gave me a mystical moderates feel. The old moderate rebels from Syria, but at the same time, I suppose it's just people going to defend their ethnic heritage and background and stuff like that. So those are just some of the interesting storylines I've been keeping my eye on when looking at this. Anything else, Will?
Yeah, just to ride on some of the stuff that you had mentioned there. Yeah, I think some of the like literal moderate rebels that were in Syria have like been, I don't know about the same individuals, but people from the same groups have been found, I think, to be fighting in this conflict over Nagorno-Karabakh. And recently, the Russian foreign minister came out and said, I think something there's like 2,000 Middle Eastern militants that have been shipped in there to fight. I think largely they were talking about Turkey, but maybe other sides, other factions have also funneled in foreign fighters. But that is interesting, that component of the whole war, that they're shipping in all these foreign mercenaries basically. I actually was not aware of how large. Like I knew that Iran had a decent Azeri population. I did not realize how large of like a plurality that might be, and like what influence that could have within Iran. And like, yeah, them getting too big for their britches. That's a very interesting consideration for why they would want to maybe keep a lid on that.
Yeah. I think that's all I have on this for now. I mean, I guess the one thing I'll say, Will, is I don't see this slowing down anytime soon. It looks like the U.S. has attempted to put some pressure on Turkey to, get them to at least recall some of the support for the Azeris and hope that will quell this fighting. But Turkey doesn't seem too interested in stopping supporting Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan doesn't seem interested in stopping to, their attempt to retake this territory. And it doesn't seem like Armenia has the ability or the international support at this point to turn the tide, at least for the fighting in Nagorno-Karabakh. Things I suppose would be different if the Azeris were looking to take some of Armenia proper. But it does seem like a very dangerous situation there, and one that over the next few weeks I don't see really winding down, but in fact, the fighting to increase, as I think the Azeris are going to retake as much of this territory as they possibly can here.
Yeah, I mean, given what we've seen with the previous agreements falling apart, that kind of shows you, I think, like I mean, there's some willingness apparently to negotiate, but not really to hew to those agreements. So it doesn't seem like either side is too committed to trying to find some kind of way out of this peacefully.
All right, well, let's wrap here today with talking about just the worst thing going on in the world. And for people looking at the video here, we have a map up of Yemen, and let's talk about this Airwars report that we got in this past week, detailing what the U.S. has been doing in Yemen, and what are some of the details there.
Yeah, I think this really highlights, as you said, some of the very worst things that Trump, worst things going on planet Earth right now, but some of the worst things done under the Trump administration during his 4 years in office, his policies in Yemen in general. And yeah, you mentioned this Airwars report. They put together this database on like the various military operations under Trump, what they call counterterrorism operations in Yemen. And the database, they collected 230 different actions by both the U.S. military and the CIA, because obviously the CIA will carry out armed missions as well. But 230 different actions under the Trump administration, around 50 of which the military never bothered to even report or announce in the first place. And so they had found some of these that had basically flown under the radar. And those 230 operations are compared to just 150, which is already quite a few. But the 230 under Trump is compared to 150 between the Bush and Obama administrations combined. So Trump has really, overseen quite an increase in military operations in Yemen. And over half of those 230 that under Trump happened in 2017. So like almost as soon as he took office, he like immediately ramped up bombing and other operations in Yemen. And in all of that, Airwars estimated up to 154 civilian casualties. That was like the upper end estimate. And that includes at least 28 children and 13 women. So, we're talking real non-combatants here. And local Yemeni groups, I think they mentioned, put the number a little bit higher of the total at like 194 civilians killed. But we are talking about like something like 150 to 200 that they are finding evidence for that they can kind of document. And these operations were already escalating under Obama, but Trump really took it further, especially in that first year that he was in office. And something we should point out, too, that like all of this counterterrorism stuff is kind of separate from the U.S. assistance to the Saudis in their war against the Houthis. We're talking about like U.S. operations against like Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula or AQAP and groups like that. The thing is, though, there is some relation here, though, because the Houthis were at one point, maybe still are, one of the most powerful enemies to the jihadist groups in Yemen. So by helping the Saudis in their war against them, we're indirectly assisting the Al-Qaeda factions, even while we continue to bomb them and kill, women and children in the process, as we're seeing in this report. And the American operations have kind of wound down since. Like there have been fewer and fewer operations since 2017 when you saw that real spike. However, the Saudi war continues, and that's been going on for now like 6 years. And because of that, Yemen still has one of the worst humanitarian crises on planet Earth. And they've got, that's been the case for nearly the entire war for, nearly 6 years now. They've got like 20 or 30 million people, their population, and over half of those depend on some kind of international aid. So this has been a devastating war, and it's still going. And these strikes that the Trump administration oversaw, like they have not really, they did not help in that situation at all. They, if anything, made it worse.
Yeah, I believe I came across this in the Airwars report too, and it was more centered on the Saudi war. Well, but they have felt like Saudi Arabia had intentionally target bridges throughout Yemen at times, hitting them a second time with airstrikes to ensure that they are destroyed. Several civilians have been killed in these strikes. They detail, but I think something that we've done a good job at, especially you will in the show on the past, is dealing how or explaining how in Yemen, where you have such a rural population, that destroying a single bridge, connecting to communities could add several hours of travel time between you and the nearest hospital. But Saudi Arabia has also targeted the hospitals throughout this war, and so it makes the hospitals further and further away, and it just creates more and more problem for people destroying the roads and the bridges and the hospitals, and all of that seems to still be going on in disturbing numbers. Looking at this map here, Will, it does seem like the Houthis have gained some territory over the past, like, I would say 3 to 6 months, maybe,
Yeah.
specifically in the Al Beta governance, which is like south central ish Yemen. I think they've made some gains, like out towards I think it's the port of Mokala out there, that they would start to make some gains towards, as well
Yeah.
in the north, along not just along the border with Saudi Arabia, but also in the northern provinces there that border Saudi Arabia. From my understanding, that the Houthis have been able to push from their traditional strongholds in the Sadr province, which is the most northern one in Yemen, and the one the Houthis are ethnically from, in Sana'a, the capital, and they have actually been able to make some gains pushing east against the Saudi-backed forces there. And so, I mean, it's so hard to follow news out of Yemen. Well, I feel like it's 3 times a week that I read stories now that Saudi Arabia says they intercepted drones or missiles coming in from Yemen. I mentioned on the last of the show that the U.S. claims that they seized a ship full of missiles going from Iran to Yemen. They didn't provide any details or any reason to give us to believe that that's true, but that's another claim for the U.S. government. So, any other updates on how this war is going?
Yeah, you mentioned the thing about the bridges. That's one, one recent bad, piece of bad news. It's just outrageous how, like, the UN is involved and stuff in Yemen, but like they've sort of been silent in terms of, like, talking about war crimes or anything like that. But the Saudis have just ruthlessly bombed every kind of civilian structure you can imagine for years on end. And, like, I don't know, what are these international bodies for if not to condemn these kind of things and to try to, do something about it? It seems like they're only ever, committed to do that if it's some adversary of the U.S. If it's a U.S. client state like Saudi, then who cares how many children are starved to death, or just how bad the humanitarian crisis is. I think you mentioned this on a recent show, but we have reports now in Yemen that parts of the country are having their worst child malnutrition on record. And this is in, like, the Saudi government controlled areas, like the Saudi backed government of Yemen, in their areas where I don't think there's quite as much fighting, and even there's, like, bad malnutrition. And so this is just this has affected the entire country. It's been a devastating war in every possible way you can imagine in terms of the humanitarian impact. And yeah, it's just, we don't hear that much about it from international bodies the way you'd think you would. The way that we heard about, civilian casualties in Syria and things like that. It's the outcry is nowhere near as loud.
Yeah, well, I've read in the past month that there's that ship off the coast of Yemen, the Red Sea, that you've documented. That's basically this oil ship that's marooned there and just kind of stuck on some sandbar, right? And it may
Yeah.
even be part of like some pumping station or something like that. But apparently, this thing has been sitting there so long, it could explode at any time, and it's this huge environmental disaster. And it's just this problem that should be fairly easy to resolve. Send a team of engineers in there, they figure out how to rework things, or simply just determine that you can't use the ship anymore, and figure out how to rework any oil that's in it and stuff like that. But rather, it just kind of sits off the coast and festers and gets worse and worse. It just seems to be a great analogy for the war overall and the humanitarian situation, where there's endless things that could happen to improve the lives of the people there. but rather the kind of international order and community and the way things are right now. The U.S. is just going to let go on. They're going to continue to sell the weapons to Saudi Arabia, provide for the most part the diplomatic cover for Saudi Arabia to do this. Saudi Arabia did suffer a pretty large loss recently on the international stage. They they didn't win their bid to get on the UN Human Rights Council again, which they were expected to. And the
Uh,
war in Yemen is one of the big reasons for that, apparently.
good.
Probably more so the death of Jamal Khashoggi. But all the
Right.
same,
One guy.
they're still going to end up hosting the G20 summit in the coming week here. And so all indications are that Saudi Arabia will be allowed to continue the genocide of Yemen, for time to come. And with Donald Trump likely being reelected, I don't see any reason that would change. I was pretty skeptical that Joe Biden would do anything to change it, anyways, even though he's paid some lip service to doing so. But Trump reelection seems to doom Yemen into just more years of this intolerable situation. Well, anything else on Yemen before we wrap?
No, man, I think you said it that, like, either way, we're probably not going to see much movement on this. Biden, his boss is the one who started this damn policy. So it's not, even whatever lip service he has paid, it's not super likely he would be real eager to make that, to change anything there. And so, yeah, it's real unfortunate that this is just where we're at right now with this conflict.
Right. I mean, that's my big criticism of Biden is that, he's been in government so long, so he could run on, I was there when this started. I know how messed up it is. I'm going to end it, just like with the
Right.
crime bill. But as usual, he shies away from it. He gives like half-assed answers and no real reason to believe him. But before we wrap here, let's just remind people where to find us and to find the show. You are on Twitter at the Will Porter. I'm at Kyle Lamslone _ the show is at con _ interest. Follow us on Facebook at Conflicts of Interest, YouTube Conflicts of Interest, and donate to the show at patreon.com/conflicts of interest. Thanks, Will. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in.
Thanks, Kyle. Bye, everybody.